So I want to thank you both. This is our third virtual event with the two of you on this series. The first one being, of course, Walk in My Combat Boots, and this one being American Heroes. And so I was curious what made the two of you choose to go back to military stories.
Matt?
Well, I have to
He
say,
dreams about this stuff.
well, it all does truly, Melissa. It starts with Jim. It's Jim's idea. We all have short memories, and it wasn't when he approached me the idea about doing living Medal of Honor recipients and Valor Award winners. Like, that's how could you say no anyway? But fascinating topic because I don't know that it's really been done outside of sort of a docu series, and but it started with Jim.
Here's an interesting thing, Melissa, and it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. And it's not exactly the way we're taught in school, especially in high school and before that. And I also, by the way, I really think it's something for anybody who's listening or watching that this is a great book to gift to teenagers and kids in college because they would really benefit from understanding sacrifice and duty and things like that, which are not sort of the kinds of things that the kids are talking about or thinking about now. But in terms of this book, and once again, this goes against a lot of what a lot of us dealt with growing up. I think that the job of a nonfiction book that's worth reading is not to fill our heads with a lot of dates and facts. The job is to make us understand. And in the case of this book, to understand heroes and heroism. And that's what I mean, and that's the job. It doesn't matter whether you remember somebody's name or specific about their story, but just that you walk away with this going like, yeah, these men and women are unbelievable. Their stories are unbelievable. It does. I mean, it reads like, it has the pace of the fiction that I write, which is a tribute to Matt and whatever. But that notion of understanding something that you didn't necessarily understand very well before.
Well, I have to say, I wish more nonfiction authors would take that advice from you because the book does read, as you said, super easy, really quick. You learn so much, as you said, about heroes and heroism, and you learn about leadership and teamwork
Yeah.
and brotherhood. And there's
Teamwork,
just,
huge,
yeah,
huge.
so many messages in this book that, like you said, the youth could really learn from. Anyone can really learn from.
Yeah,
Um,
this notion of us rather than me,
mhm.
which is huge. I mean, Matt, do you want to talk about that a little bit in the military? Because it's something that I came to understand better than I ever did in working with Matt on walking my combat boots in this book. But it is a central thing. Go ahead, Matt, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, Melissa, and it's like the recurring theme, almost verbatim, of all the people that we spoke to that shared their stories would start something along the lines of, I don't know why you want to talk to me, and even the Medal of Honor recipients were that self-deprecating, and then it would just as you got them talking would kind of get into the here's the moment of truth point of the story, and they would all say, "Well, I just did what needed to be done." And then the follow on to that was, "Well, I did it for my buddy on my left and right, or the team, or whatever, and I wear it for them." Every single one of them, like it was all always about the other people, and
And imagine if we could get back to that or just recreate it, that notion of, yes, you want to take care of your family and you want to take care of the people around you. We really do, and it's us. And if we started doing that more, I think it would be useful. I do. Maybe maybe the time has passed for that, but I hope not.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
Jim,
actually.
if I could just, Melissa, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just on the heels of that, because Jim's been saying it ever since we started this project, and especially since publication, that it's these men and women are all courageous, and to that point, it's like just do small things, just do the little things, be courageous about the little things, and the greater good stuff will work.
Mhm. Yeah, and one of the things I was going to say, and you hit it right on the head there, is we're very fortunate here at the Reagan Library. Every year, we bring Medal of Honor recipients to the library in February of each year, and they speak to high school students to
Hmm.
share their story. And without fail, what they always say in the beginning is, "This award isn't for me; it's for my
Yeah.
brothers and sisters on the field." Um,
Hmm.
and
Yep,
again,
yep, yep.
that theme came through your book, and I was
And
curious.
there's so many people, as Matt knows, because Matt's been there, that who wind up in combat and aren't getting medals, but they absolutely deserve them, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. So I was curious, in addition to the theme of um, this shouldn't be my medal for me, this is my medal for you, were there other themes that sort of came out as you were speaking to all the different veterans?
Well, I would tell you, I think, Melissa, that they all personify many values, that we all hold true. And it almost sounds like, giving a sermon when you say, like, what these themes that showed out, like selfless service, again, to the person. And it's not just it's all unscripted. They don't know the questions. We're just having a conversation. And so it just comes out like you can't, I don't think someone could make it up. So when you ask that, sort of my back into that answer is, I think, selfless service comes up continually, courage, personal, physical courage as well as moral courage. I think duty, fulfilling obligations. I think those three jumped out to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and also just once again trying to do some of the right thing. I mean, one not small thing, but big thing that we need to deal with is veterans. And if it can help people think more about that, and what do you do? What everybody who's watching it, what are you doing? How are you helping? How are you? I mean, and it's not enough to just say thank you for your service. That's nice, but it's really what are we? One, do you understand what that service is? And in most cases, a lot of people don't. They're thankful, but they don't know what they're thankful for. And then what are we doing? What are we doing? How are we? This doesn't come up for the most part, and we have all these political debates right now. It doesn't come up much. Military a little bit. I mean, not to be, and this is I'm not trying to be political at all, but that the phrase is floating around about losers, and boy, are these people the farthest from that. I mean, these are winners. These are unbelievable winners, and just heroes. And how we talk about heroes. You got the World Series going on now with your Dodgers and some other people's Yankees, et cetera. So we have our judges and the various heroes there. The baseball player judge, or Mahomes, or whoever Taylor Swift, whoever your heroes are. But and that's fine. That's okay. That's human nature. But these people are really heroes. When you're willing to sacrifice your life for other people, for this country, that's stunning stuff. That's way beyond baseball. No, no, I have no issues with baseball and football, but we're not thinking that way as a nation right now, which is we need to get back to that, or if we ever were there. We either have to get back to it or initiate it now. So hopefully this kind of book helps. And as I said, I really do think it's useful to pass this on or get other copies for these kids. And it should be in the schools.
Mm-hmm.
Matt and I were just at West Point. A
Oh,
great experience. I grew up near there, so it was particularly special for me to go back. And hasn't changed much, which is a good thing. But once again, a lot of these kids, I would call them kids, but cadets are being exposed to the book now, reading the book, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's useful. And their questions were great. And
good.
once again, this is, as Matt said, we're in a room, and within a number of years, the generals are going to come out of this room, some, and other kinds of leaders. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and again, as you just said, you're speaking. Your first word was kids, and you change it to cadets. And as you're reading this book, I mean, there are heroes in this
Yeah.
book who are
Yeah.
19 years old,
Yes.
running through a field with bullets whizzing through their head to save their, fellow, comrade who's been injured on the field. Just incredible stories of selflessness, for
Mhm.
sure. So,
Melissa,
yeah, please.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm just going to say, to that, it's like, I was thinking the same point. It's not something that other people do. We think about these stories of bravery and these courageous, soldierly stories. They're all some of the older men and older women and somebody else does. But you thank you for pointing that out, because a lot of these, several of these recipients were, in their teens or early 20s, and they weren't generals. They were young enlisted guys and young lieutenants and captains. They were us, and I think that's, as Jim says, this theme of inspiring people just to be courageous and
Well,
whatever.
Woody, what was it? Was Woody 19?
He was,
1920?
yeah, he was a young guy.
This is
Woody,
a guy, and right. Go ahead. You can, that story.
you might recall this. It's the leadoff hitter. He went ashore at Iwo Jima. Met by the Japanese, fortified positions, and it's just a meat grinder of an experience. I mean, for the Marines, and literally, Woody grabs his flamethrower, 90 pounds of, whatever oxygen and fuel, and takes out pretty much single-handedly all 9 of these bunkers. I mean, by himself, under fire that none of us could ever imagine, with no cover, and he just did it. And he was a teenager. He had another 75 years of his life afterwards.
Yep. And that's actually, I'm glad you brought him up, because I wanted to bring him up. So let's talk about Woody. Herschel is his name. He goes by Woody. And in 2018, we had just the unbelievable honor of bringing him out to the library, because we installed one of his Gold Star family memorial monuments on our campus. And we want to show you a quick clip. So we're gonna play a video really quick.
So let us all remember what freedom really costs. Never, ever to forget the loved ones that many of us lost. And to the Gold Star families here, thank you for coming. You are the reason we're here. Our heartfelt gratitude goes to you for the sacrifice that you made.
So he was 95 years old when he came to the Reagan Library. He went to every single installation while he was still living. And here's someone who, we just said, at the age of 19, was a hero on the field, and then took it upon himself to make sure that those who lost their lives were never forgotten, and that we could honor the family members.
That phrase that he used. Let us not forget or remember or understand what freedom costs. It's a really powerful phrase, and it's so true.
Yeah. So again, his legacy continues. Yes, he's a Medal of Honor recipient, but his legacy now lives on in these memorials, Gold Star memorials that are everywhere. And in your book, you actually interviewed his grandson Brent, and now Brent carries on his Woody's foundation.
I can't believe we threw Melissa that nice softball there. I didn't know where you were going with it. So boom, there it was. Yeah. And she banged it out of the park. And let me put a clip on. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, so great. So speaking of Woody, each chapter in your book is another hero. And it made me, and these heroes, I mean, it's Medal of Honor recipients, it's Silver Star recipients, Purple Star, Distinguished Flying Cross. I don't know if I have that one right. How did you choose who you were going to speak to in this book?
Jim, you want me to
No,
lead
Matt, you're handling this baby.
Okay. No. Well, so it's a 2-part answer, Melissa. Seriously, we had some wonderful help from the Congressional Medal of Honor Society, who got introductions to the living recipients, and so from that we were able to cultivate some relationships and get engaged with a bunch. I can't remember the final number of recipients, and then we realized we probably need to open our aperture a little more, and still try and focus on the Valor Award.
Partly because it's hard to separate, honestly, with some of the people, the lesser not lesser, but Valor Awards that are not. What these men and women did is extraordinary at all levels.
And when you look at the writing of the awards from the Medal of Honor through like the Distinguished Service Cross to the Silver Star and the Flying Cross and all these, they're a comma but in between the difference. And as Jim and I were chatting before, you read, and I hope that as the readers read these stories and they don't think of it in an antagonistic way, but they look at like, wow, this is amazing. Like what Chuck Ritter, who is a Silver Star recipient, that how he didn't get the Medal of Honor. I don't know what else you could have to do in the spirit it's intended. But as far as how we picked at the end, I mean, that got into the Jim world. But I think we got pretty much everybody we interviewed.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
well, you know what? Because they all have good stories. We've talked about, Matt has talked about this before. It is my belief that pretty much everybody out there, everybody listening, everybody watching, has at least one extraordinary story to tell. Sometimes a lot of stories, but we all do. There's something we just tell a story and just it'll blow your mind. So if you're, and Matt's a great interviewer, so. We can usually, it was a little more challenging with the librarians and booksellers who are wonderful, but the stories aren't quite at the level of Medal of Honor winners. But yeah.
Well,
we did a book for booksellers and librarians. Yeah.
So again, each chapter is a different American hero, and one of your chapters is on Ralph Pucket Jr. And what I loved in that chapter is the chapter talks about how he was very afraid to go to war. And so he was seeking out advice. And the advice he was given was to check in with your men, to think about them and not yourself. And it was great advice. He clearly took it to heart. And I was actually curious if you could share why this book was dedicated to him when there were so many, amazing people in your book. What made you decide to dedicate it in his honor?
Well, I'll lead off and then pass it to Jim. But of all the books we've done, Melissa, this is our fifth one. Our fifth one was just published last Monday. Only one interview was done in person, and that was with Colonel Pucket. And there's a fun story behind how that came to be, but it just turned out that I went to his house in Columbus, Georgia, and sat down with he and his wife, and just had an amazing time. And as you can appreciate, one of the most iconic soldiers, even before the Medal of Honor event, he's just a Ranger legend. So for a young Ranger, to have the opportunity to sit with him was really amazing. And then, of course, as the story goes, he turned out was the last living Medal of Honor recipient. And on top of that, he was so, just as they all were, but he was so energetic, so excited, so just enjoyable to be with. And as it says in that forward, he couldn't wait to get back to base, to Fort Benning, to go back and talk to the lieutenants. I mean, the guy was 90, 1 or 2 years old. And I don't know, it just seemed like the perfect opportunity to show the gratitude for a legend like him. I mean, could have been any of them, but I think Ralph was a good fitting recipient of our thanks.
Sure.
That makes sense.
So your book covers heroes from you got World War II, you got Vietnam, you've got Iraq and Afghanistan, sort of everything in between. And I was curious if, as you were going through the different interviews, if you saw similarities or differences between the stories of the different wars and the different eras.
Jim, you might, okay, I'll just jump in.
No, I mean, one of the things with why Matt is so perfect for this kind of book, although he was really great with the ER nurses too, which is another kind of hero, is Matt has been there.
Yeah.
And yeah, Matt can, maybe, and that's another thing. He's great at talking to these people because he has been there. He does ask the right questions. He gets them to talk. A lot of people have been in combat don't want to talk about it. And most of us know that if we've had somebody, no, I don't really want to talk about it. But Matt could get people talking about it, and he's been there. Matt, could you just a little sense, because a lot of the people who are watching and listening, they haven't been there. They don't, and the kids, they'll watch a movie or they'll play video games, and it ain't that. It just isn't that. Matt, do you want? I mean, one of the things, just a quick. I remember sitting at a table one night with Matt, and I was a stupid question. I said, Matt, how close can you be sometimes to the person who's trying to kill you? And he just reached across the table and pointed the gun at me. And you go that and things like that. I don't know if that's corny or not, but it brings it home. You get it. You
Yeah.
understand.
Well, and we talk about Woody Williams, you talk about Ralph Puckett, when somebody says fix bayonets, it's because things have gotten really bad. And as Jim was saying, I think, kind of answering all the questions all at once here, Melissa, is, combat is so violent, and it's just at a moment, everything just disintegrates, peace disintegrates and violence erupts. I mean, that's the best I can tell you. And the chaos that ensues, the sensory overload of everything that's going on. As Jim said, sometimes it's right here, sometimes it's 20 yards away, sometimes it's right here. And each of us has to struggle with, hey, by the way, I got to do my job now. I gotta muscle through all this just like that, do my job. And then you realize, man, in some cases, this isn't working. Whatever I as a leader am doing isn't working. Somebody has to step up. And that's kind of the lead in, I think, of what these stories all have in common, is that they all jumped in at that next level. And I tell you, it's funny you bring that up too, just really quickly, the difference in generations. Some of the vocabulary is a little generational. Their discussions, I don't know, I couldn't give you an example, but just, in our normal verbiage, and I'm doing these all over the phone, so I'm seeing some of, the icebox versus freezer kind of stuff. But although there was this soldierly language that was exactly the same, even though the jungles of Vietnam, the mountaintops of Korea, the buildings in Iraq, or the mountains of Afghanistan, they're still talking about the soldiers, and there's Joe, and there's this, and that's what we do. And I thought it was so wild that of 60, 70 years of history at that fundamental level, they all use the same language and say the same thing.
I mean, just a little sidebar on that in terms of the chaos when combat happens or when terrible things happen involving explosions and bombs hitting or whatever. And people go, well, why didn't the media get it right? You can't get it right because it's chaos. And sometimes it takes days to sit to actually figure out what the heck happened. And you have to talk to a lot of people. So they're going like, well, why didn't they get it right the first day? Or why didn't such and such politician jump in there? Well, because it was chaos and nobody knew exactly what was going on. I think that's pretty accurate, Matt, right?
100%. The old story of two soldiers, in the middle of the street, and a grenade lands in between them, and it turns out to be a dud. And one guy's like, "Hey, we were pretty lucky. Let's move on." The other guy says, "Hey, man, I'm done. I'm through." Both had the exact same experience, saw it through literally think the same lens, but have two completely different reactions, and that does happen. Yeah. That was a great example that you just gave. Why doesn't somebody get it right? Because they can't.
Right.
They can't. It's impossible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a really good point. And, a lot of your stories had similar themes. And I like the story of, I'm going to look at my notes here, Patrick Henry Brady and Thomas William Bennett, because it showcased the honor of those in the military who are medics, who are rushing out in open fields with gunfire going around to save those who have fallen.
Yep. No, those are amazing. And Bennett was a conscientious objector too. And Matt has said that in his experience, he's never seen anybody on a battlefield who hasn't lived up to it, who hasn't really, And so here you have Bennett, who's a conscientious objector, but when he's out there, he did incredibly heroic stuff. He just did, which is interesting.
Yeah, and if I could just to add in on that one too, not to spill the whole beans for the readers, but this guy wrote poetry. He wrote hymns. He wrote um, prayers, and he would dutifully send this. I mean, you talk about the Renaissance guy doesn't do it justice, and yet he felt this need to he had to do his service, even though he objected. And I mean, talk about courage. I mean, what, holy mackerel! Wow.
Well, and again, another reason why your book is so great is because it's shedding light on these heroes who may not have light shed on them, right? So most of us have seen the movie with Dunkirk, right? Which is the same kind of story, but we know his story because someone made a movie about it. But if you don't make a movie about it, you don't necessarily know, and your book is allowing people to learn so much about these heroes that, we could pass by in the street and have no idea what they've done.
Absolutely.
Now, speaking of military medics, you have a chapter on, and I don't know, hopefully I pronounced this last name right, Donna Barbich. So she was a nurse in Vietnam. She rose through the ranks. She ended up becoming a major general. I loved that. And I was just curious how you came across her story.
I think she was, I had reached out to one of the women veterans organizations and asked for some of their help and recommendations. Because our female soldier population is considerably smaller than the male population, even though nowadays, the combat arms is integrated. But it was not the easiest task to reach out and get some of our female soldier stories. So whatever.
Early on, they weren't in combat much at all, other than nurses. So that was another problem in terms of finding people who have won medals. It took a while for that. And in her case, what's particularly interesting is just following her from basic, where they kind of weren't letting her do anything, because they really hadn't figured out how to integrate women in a meaningful way into combat, which obviously they do a lot better now. But just seeing her rise through the ranks and the crap she had to put up with, honestly, I mean, just the stuff, she'd show up places and they go, "You're a woman." Oh, you noticed. Yeah. I'm sorry, Matt, you were.
No, I mean, that was where we were going. I mean, and it just, she did it, and she went to Vietnam like everybody else and did her thing and patched a lot of people up, survived through the bombings and the mortar attacks and everything, and just, came back for more. I mean, again, it sounds like a tagline, like, gave him 2 scoops and came back for more, but she did. I mean, she retired as a 2-star general, which,
And the Vietnam vets are another interesting area, because a lot of those men and women came back and they were treated badly.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think they've ever gotten the due that they should get. I mean, now we're a little better at it. People come back and we're like, okay, good, you did a good thing over there. But when a lot of them came back, it was like, you're a criminal, you're a terrible person. How could you do that? Da, da, da. Which is, and one of my best friends, I told this story to Matt. He was there and he read Walk in My Combat Boots, and he immediately contacted half a dozen people that he served with. And he said, read this book because it's great for us to reminisce about what we went through, which is another thing. And this is another area in terms of this book where I think it's the book is particularly emotional, which is military families. I mean, this is, and in some cases, some of the military families, they don't even know the stories of their husbands, wives, children, whatever. And this helps them to understand their own people a little better sometimes.
Yeah, we did a World War II exhibition a year or two ago, and we were fortunate to be able to speak with about a half a dozen World War II veterans, right? They're so few and far between now. And that was one of the most common threads, was that family members didn't know what their grandfather had done or whatever until they were on their deathbed, or just so many of those stories are kept inside.
Yeah, my father, World War II, never talked about it, ever.
Yeah, exactly. So the last question was on a female member of the military. So I will continue that thread and say you also spoke about Cindy Pritchett. And I was just curious if there was a message to be taken away from sort of women in the military from the different interviews you did.
I would say, quite candidly, if we were in person looking in the eye, Melissa is as tough as anybody. You know, that's the first thing that jumped out. I thought there's no doubt about standards. There's no doubt about anything. Like you're talking soldier to soldier, or I should say, I was talking soldier to soldier. And Cindy was a lot of fun too, because she'd been in Mogadishu right before I got there. If you read her story, and she, thank goodness she was on the ground there getting the U.S. base organized because nobody else was, and she saw the danger and saw the threat. But read the book on her. But I think that the first thing that jumps out, that was toughness. Like, absolute, not asking for more, not asking for anything less, no pity, no nothing, and not being I'm such a tough guy, chew tobacco and smoke and drink whiskey, like that thing. But they're just tough. They were solid, and I thought that was as awesome as anybody else that we've interviewed. And I just have to qualify that and say, I spent my entire career in the infantry and never had any female soldier, because it wasn't integrated. So my interaction over 20 years of combat, or 20 years of service, and my tours in Mogadishu and Iraq were, minuscule experiences with female soldiers. So this was also enjoyable to me to see what I thought I knew, but they put the exclamation point in it.
Yeah. So glad you included them. You mentioned a little bit ago, some of the stories are so moving. I found Paris Davis's story really moving, and there were a couple of lines in there. He says, there's no race here. In the dark, brown is just as black or white as anyone else. And then later he said, bullets have no color. What did it mean to him? It took 57 years to be awarded the Medal of Honor. What did it mean to him when it finally came true?
Well, for one thing, I mean, his story is a movie for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't mean to.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, Jim's absolutely right. And when I spoke to him, and I if anybody maybe had a right to be angry, he would be at the top of the list. And if he was, he didn't show it. Like he never showed it. And I talked to him. We had the transcript. Jim's read the transcripts. We looked at him a bunch of times. But he was, again, just.
Why don't you tell them, because they haven't, what his story is a little bit in terms of how he,
Yeah, so a young black officer, which in itself is a challenge in the 60s, who then goes into the special forces to become a Green Beret, which again is a smaller piece of a smaller pie and a smaller puzzle, and goes right into the thick of it. Has an amazing, and when I say amazing, out there experience in the jungles doing the special forces missions with great success. And he is just undisturbed and unperturbed at anything the enemy can do. And I mean, as you read what was going on, and but I can't remember exactly what year it was, but he was in the thick of every fight, for a year. And, the base is getting overrun one day, and he comes in and saves the day. They send him on secret missions. He does them without reservation. Just, so matter of fact, just so, incredible about, that's just what I was there to do. And to his credit, and to your point, Melissa, I think those were the only times he brought up race at all, was just sort of, to address it in a matter-of-fact way. But I just recall he had just such a pleasant tone about him. And again, never was like, well, it took him long enough to get me here. It was just what an honor. And his granddaughter.
Because supposedly his applications and everything were lost along the way and things like that. And that's what took it so long. Yeah. Whatever happened there.
So I actually have a question that you may actually not have the answer for because you don't know, which is fine. Do you know the process of someone being nominated for and then becoming a recipient of a Medal of Honor? Do you know how that works?
So that's a yes, no answer. There is a protocol and a system, the award system that the military has, particularly in combat. However, the Medal of Honor, and this has probably been my theme, and Jim and I talked about this a lot. This is the moon. This is two young privates are out, on a street corner in the fight, and I turn to Jim and say, "Man, Jim, you saved my life. That's the bravest thing I've ever seen anybody do." And would I know enough to know that I should, put him in for the Congressional Medal of Honor? Because again, remember, it's way up there. And so I think, what happens in this process, and it's a bureaucracy, no doubt. But all along the way, you have human interaction, and humans are fallible, and there's a lot of error. Or somebody says, "Hey, Eversmann, I hear what you're saying, but that Patterson was just doing his job. So no, we're not gonna. I don't think it's worthy. So it stops here." You can see how it gets really muddy.
But some of these stories are so extraordinary that you can definitely see why somebody would say, "Oh my God!" I mean, what that person did is so over the moon.
Yeah.
It is so here that we should consider that person for this kind of medal. Yeah. And when you read the stories, you'll see that in most cases. But as Matt has said, how do you decide what's here and what's here, and then so many heroic acts that have gone without awards.
Yeah. I mean, it's subjective at best.
Yeah, sure, of course. Now, I'm glad you included Chuck Pfeiffer's story. It shed a light on PTSD and the emotional challenges that war and being in the military can bring somebody. Did you hear a lot of these types of stories?
Interestingly, no. There would be some casual reference to it. There were some offline conversations I had, not quite as much as in Walking My Combat Boots, but yeah, Chuck Pfeiffer, he kind of led with it. That was, before we even turned on the recorder, he was quite happy to share his story. He tells it like an adventure, but you can tell it really was. I mean, who could blame him? Again, another SF guy, another Green Beret in the thick of it, and horrible things that he has to see and do, and then come back. And it's. But he did. He was. He put a good light on it too.
And I think obviously it's a little more of a modern day thing in terms of PTSD. I think a lot of people just, this is not good. I'm messed up and whatever, and they just go on. And we've talked, we did the ER nurses, and you listen to their stories, and you have to say an awful lot of people who are ER nurses probably have PTSD. And somehow they move on. They go to work the next day. Not to demean it, because it is a big thing, but and I guess it's certainly different to be in combat versus to be in an emergency room. But a lot of people are doing heroic acts, and nurses are certainly one of them. My God.
Absolutely.
Oh, they're deployed the whole time that they're on the job. Like they never get to come home. But sorry, but that was a great book, Jim. And Jim said that's a good one too. If I could put a plug in for ER nurses as well.
So let's turn to McKenna Frank Miller. I thought his chapter ended really with such a powerful statement. It said, I'm going to quote here, "Good people just don't quit. They stay in the fight and lead. They run through a situation knowing there's a 50-50 chance of taking one in the head because they want to do their job, but also because they want to protect their friends and be a teammate. Good people always go above and beyond. Good people never leave anyone behind. Leaders never quit." I just thought that was such an incredible story, but my question's actually a little weird off of that. After reading his whole chapter and sort of it ending that way, I almost wanted to know more about his life in terms of what he was doing today. And it just made me kind of wonder if, these people were such heroes then. I'm sure they've continued this sort of leadership in their lives, like Woody Williams. Did you ever have those kind of conversations with these people, the veterans, when you're on the phone with them, of how they're continuing their lives?
Yeah, not as dramatically a question, but it would generally tail into, so kind of once you got out, right, like, you would toss that out. Frank is still working in the defense world, two in it, you giving him two scoops every day. But what an amazing guy too. And as when you talk about the leaders don't quit and go back for more, what should be pointed out in this story is that, he went in harm's way not to save an American, but to retrieve French soldiers, allies of ours in the most precarious situation. And just about died doing it, literally almost died doing it. And again, read this story, but that just shows you even more so. It's not just, it has no bounds, no limits on, their conviction. And I think, again, a common theme for all these men and women.
Yeah. So we talked about Woody Williams again, and that we had the honor of having him here. There was someone else you wrote about that we also had here. Back in 2015, our Veterans Day speaker was Travis Mills. Now, in your book, you talk about how in 2019 he was awarded the Service Act honoree for his lifetime of selfless service to members of the combat wounded community. For those who haven't read the book yet, he basically became a quadruple amputee due to injuries he sustained in war. And I don't know if I've ever met anyone with such a vibrant, fun personality in my life. So we thought to kind of showcase that personality with everyone, we'd show everyone a quick clip from that Veterans Day event.
We need to, get veterans back to work in the civilian, job force. Thanks. Yeah. And I don't want to be called wounded anymore, if that's okay. I mean, I put my pants on like everybody else, and then I put my legs on,
That's very Travis Mills.
It's a good line, man. If you can do that, God bless him.
So
That's what you have to do sometimes. I mean, I've always been a big fan. When it gets dark, you gotta humor helps, and I think that's something you see. And Matt certainly in combat, and we also did a book on the police, and dark humor helps to get you through the day and the night.
Do you have a moment just to share some of what he's doing today in terms of helping the wounded warrior community?
Yeah, so I can't not say what a honor and privilege it was to speak to Travis, because he was just, that clip you just showed, thank you for showing that. He was just as matter of fact on the phone, two soldiers talking, two guys talking, and you didn't have to sugarcoat anything, just straight up, right down the middle of the fairway, and let's talk about it. And he would share and share and share. And again, the classic, and when I say classic, it's thankfully a smaller community, but it's a classic. I'm going to get out and I'm not going to stop. And what can I do to help, next generation or this current generation of wounded soldiers? What can we do to take care of their families? Like the sky is the limit. Like this is everyone's got an alive day. And I can't remember if he talked about a live day. I suspect he did, but and all the gravely wounded, talk about the day they wake up and they're like, oh wow, I'm still alive. And he just kept moving forward, and it literally, in fact, it was hard to pin him down, to schedule and to get going, because he was always on the move. He's out speaking, he's out, doing Gold Star stuff, he's doing retreats, he's doing everything. And I would close it just to say, Melissa, as you've met him, you can't make this up. No one could fake it. Even if somebody did, I don't know who would think about faking it, but you can't. Like, this is all as earnest and genuine and heartfelt as it can be. And he started this foundation to go out and continue giving. Why? Because why not? I mean,
it's something that Matt said, and it goes back to an earlier thing about it being useful for younger people to read this book, and that has to do with kids who might be well served to go into the military, It might really fit who they are and what their needs are right now, and maybe they're not thinking about it. But this is the kind of books. I mean, it's crazy the way some kids, oh, what got me there was seeing Black Hawk Down or whatever the heck it is. But I think this is a good book in terms of, okay, well, that can be a career choice for some young kids. And I think recruiting is difficult now. And I think this book could help some kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it actually really is a great lead into my final question. This program that we're recording right now will actually air on Veterans Day. And I wondered if you each might have a message you'd like to share with anyone watching the importance of our nation's military.
Matt?
Yeah, well, listen, to every veteran, every family member, every friend of a veteran, the first two words are thank you, because it is the team of teams that puts it all together, and everybody's support and encouragement and love, understanding is all just so important for our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and marine. And I say thank you, and I hope that this book, did you justice, and I hope you're as proud of it as we are.
Yeah. The other thing is when I go out speaking, sometimes it's about getting kids better education for kids, or in this case, dealing with veterans. Or I always say to the audience, we didn't do anything. You all are watching and listening. We didn't do anything yet. You're just watching and listening. So don't pat yourself on the back yet. So, and the point is, do something. Use your imagination a little bit. If you're moved by this, if you get it, go do something. We talked before about being small, small things that can be heroic. What can you literally do in your life that would help beyond, thank you for your service and stuff like that, which is easy. Well, is there something you can do to help vets? Is there something you can do to help the service organizations? There's something you can do if you know some vets, or is there something you can do to help kids, look at the armed services as possible. What can you do, people that are watching and listening? Because just listening, that's nice. and we talked and whatever. And obviously for us, and I think this is true for both of us, we're happy to have done these books because we think it's a good thing. And once again, getting back to what I said originally, that you read this book, you understand something better than you did before. And I think and so that for us, that's a big deal.
I loved that. As we conclude, Matt, thank you for your service. We want to make sure everyone understands. I know Jim talked about it earlier, but you are a veteran, and thank you, with an incredible story as well, while you served. For those who are watching this, please, please, please buy yourself a copy of American Heroes. You can buy it everywhere. You can buy it from the Reagan Library Museum store as well as everywhere else you can buy a book. Please do buy it. As they both said, it's an incredible book with incredible stories. Great for the children and the young people in your lives, but a great leadership book for anybody. And we want to thank you both so much for your time. Thank you for writing the book, and thank you for coming on this with me and talking about it. It's always wonderful.
Thank you.
And we look forward to having you maybe in a year or two with your next one.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. And you're great at this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You are too, Matt.
Jim,
Thank you.
You're no slouch yourself.
Thank you for joining us for today's virtual programming event. We hope this conversation has inspired you to share what you've learned with your family and friends, and that you'll join us again for an upcoming event.
And let me offer lesson number 1 about America. All great change in America begins at the dinner table. So tomorrow night in the kitchen, I hope the talking begins. And children, if your parents haven't been teaching you what it means to be an American, let them know and nail them on it. That would be a very American thing to do.